4 or 5 scriptures that if you want to just flip, if you want to go there to 1 Peter chapter 5, we'll try to get it up on the screen. We're going to do just a quick pass through in 1 Peter chapter 5, read some verses out of 1 Peter 5, Ezekiel chapter 28, Isaiah chapter 14, and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. They all connect. There's nothing in this word that don't connect to everything else in this word. And one of the things that just keeps alive in my spirit is, don't just read this book like history and theology. Read this like the life of God inside of His people. God alive in these folk, because that's what it shows us. And when He shows us Hebrews chapter 11 in the hall of faith, He ends that with saying, seeing we are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses that are in front of us, who ran their race, let us run our race, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And just a challenge to find your own life and to find the battle that you're in somewhere in this word, because it will speak to where you are. And you do need a time in this word. This word, Ephesians 5 said, it's the washing of the water of the word. How many know stuff gets on you in this world that we're in? And it's the washing of the water of the word. It is this word that you grow thereby. Desire the sincere milk of the word so you can grow by that, because what God has for you is too much for you, and you stay where you are, you'll miss it. And you got to learn to grow and equip and empower and learn this word and how you use this word as a sword of the Spirit of God. We're going to read some word and we're going to connect some dots about this day that we are living in today. The key phrase of the whole book of Deuteronomy is, as it is this day. It's used, I think, 68 times in that book, like it is today. As it is this day, not some other day. Not like it's going to be, not like it was today. The battle that we face this day, the battle that we fight, the day we're living in, the battle that we fight, and the enemy that we face. And how it is manifest where we live. 1 Peter 5 talks about your adversary. Isn't that amazing? Your adversary, the devil, that ain't your husband and that ain't your wife. And it ain't somebody you got issues with, and it ain't somebody you work with, and your problem and your adversity has a personality behind it. And your adversary, the devil. This is out of 1 Peter 5, beginning in verse 6. You humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time. That is a over-under verse. You need to know what to get under so you can get over your situation. If you will learn to position yourself in God, if you will learn to submit yourself to God, if you will learn to humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that is a safe place, so that in due season He may exalt you. Position yourself so He can position you in Him. And we got to get this word and understand our position in Him, because there's great adversity against who you are and what you have in God that comes against you, and all that's connected. All overcomers in God have learned how to be undercomers, okay? They have learned what to put themselves under so they can come over. And it's learning to position yourself in God. Very, very important. How? By casting all your care, not some of your, all of your cares upon Him, because of His care for you. He cares for you. He's paid that price that He cares for you, but He will not come and take your cares from you. He invites you to cast your cares on Him, to place that on Him. Now, all of that sets us up for the verse that I want to talk about getting it in God's hands and learning what that means. In verse 8, so here we go. You need to be sober. You need to be vigilant because. I'll read that. Be sober, be vigilant because. You need to keep your head on straight in the day that we're in. You do not need to be slumbering. You do not need to be distracted. You do not need to be intoxicated with the spirit of this world. You need to be sober. You need to be vigilant. You need to pay attention because your enemy sure is. He is very sober. He is very vigilant. And you cannot just live your life in this day because you prayed a prayer one time flopping around like a fish out of the water. Okay? Man, adversity is your element. Adversity is where you thrive in God. And this is all that where I've been in the last few days. God forbid that we raise up another generation of lap cats who are tame and can be petted and don't know how to fight. We've got to raise up a generation that can get in this fight and stand their ground. You have to pay attention in this day to who you are. Because your adversary knows who he is. He actually knows who you are, but it's his job to keep you from understanding who you are, because if you ever understand who you are, his game's over. You got to understand, pay attention to, be sober, be vigilant about who you are, about what's going on inside of you, around your world, about where you've been positioned in the day that you're in, and more than anything, what's going on in that head of yours. That is part of taking every thought captive. Pay close attention. Be sober, be vigilant to who you are, where you are, what the things that God has put in it. Lest Satan should get an advantage, take the biggest piece of the pie of our life. Lest Satan should get an advantage over us because we're not ignorant of his devices. But a lot of folk live that way. Your adversary, your devil, as a roaring lion, goes about seeking whom he may devour. How do I know if the enemy has targeted me and is trying to destroy my life? Take your finger and check and see if you got a pulse. Okay? And especially if you're alive in God and have a purpose and a destiny in God. And it's like whom he may destroy. It's like he comes into our life saying, may I destroy something that belongs? And you got to say, no, you may not. You have got to resist steadfastly in the faith. You got to excuse him and say, no, you can go now. I think it was John Wesley in his writing. I may have two guys mixed up, but you probably don't know, so it won't matter. I think it was John Wesley in his writing who told about the night he was in a sound sleep and he was just awakened out of the sleep, startled, awakened by the reality that there was someone in the room with him, a presence. And he woke up out of his sleep and the devil himself was in the room. Wesley wrote this. And he said, I looked and it was the devil, and I said, oh, it's just you. And turned over and went back to sleep. I think it was Martin Luther who was doing his study and who was writing some of his studies out to bring the reality of the whole Protestant renewal to our world, and doing some of his studies and realized he was not alone in the study. There was a presence in the room, and looked and it was the devil, and Luther threw the inkwell at him. I have shared this before. I think I've shared this before. But you probably forgot, and it'll do you good to hear it again. It'll sure do you good for me to tell it, because the word of your testimony, okay? It's part of the word of our. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb did not overcome him. They overcame him by the blood and the word of their testimony. And they loved not their life unto the death. If you hanging on to your life and love your life, you are done, hun. You've got to have a life on the line for God if you're going to overcome it. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony. This is just part of the word of the testimony of overcoming that I need. I used to do a lot of spiritual warfare in my sleep. My sweetheart can testify to that better than I can. But in my dreams and in my sleep, I am fighting stuff, okay? And it seldom woke me up. It always woke her up. And I usually would remember where I was and why I was fighting and what I was fighting. But this is when we lived in Henderson, Tennessee. One night I am sound asleep. In my sleep, I'm dreaming I'm asleep. That's good stuff right there. You get double credit for those hours, okay? But in my dream, I'm dreaming and I'm asleep. And in my dream, I'm awakened by the reality that there's a presence in the room. And across the room at the end of the bed, there is, and there literally was, a dresser against the bedroom wall there. And as I wake up, I know what woke me up. Behind that dresser, there is a red, radiant, glowing power that you could feel it, you could hear it, just the presence of that awesome power. And I knew in my dream it was the enemy. It was the devil. And what he was saying to me was, you don't want me to come out from here. And what I said in my dream was, if you're so bad, why are you hiding behind the dresser? The enemy is not that bad. And he seldom ever comes out from behind what he's hiding behind and what he's doing in your life. And you've got to be aware, and you've got to be focused, and you've got to know he is the one who does not want to come out, okay? And he will tell you, you don't want me to come out? Yeah, I want you to come out. Show your hand. He works in darkness and deception among the children of light. So, he needs you to walk in darkness and deception and fear so he can mess with your stuff. Okay? But if we walk in the light as God is in the light, then we have fellowship one with another. And the blood of his son Jesus cleanses us from all sin. That is a very important thing in this battle, because the enemy is the accuser of the brethren. And we all got stuff. And that word, when it said cleanses us from all sin, you search that word out, because the Greek has moods and tenses and verbs and all this. But what the Greek tells you is that word cleanses is contemporaneous. I thought, well, that's nice. I wish you'd said something I understood. Could you say that in English? Contemporaneous means it happens at the exact same instant. Not a blink of the eye before, not a blink of the eye after. They are contemporaries. It happens if I'm walking in the light in him, as soon as I mess up and sin, immediately at that moment the blood of Jesus has got that. Now I can't walk in darkness and claim that. Okay? But that is about him and who we are in him. And the enemy comes and says, may I remind you of your sin? And you got to say, may I remind you of the blood of Jesus and my walk with him? Your adversary, the devil, seldom comes from behind what he is working and what he's hidden behind. And your focus has got to get right. I told the class Wednesday night, the devil is not out after your health, your wealth, and your stuff. He could care less about that. Now listen to me real close. I did not say he will not take your health, your wealth, and your stuff. He'll take anything you let him take. But that is not his goal. That is not what he's looking for. He's after your heart. Okay? And if you allow your heart to get attached to your life and your health and your wealth and your stuff, when he takes pieces of your stuff, he's taking pieces of your heart. And you got to walk with a different kind of heart than that if you want to walk in the victory that God has for you. If you allow your heart to get connected to stuff. Very interesting verse. Jesus said in John 14, I believe it's down in verse 9, the prince of this world. Isn't that an strange thing that Jesus the Christ would call the enemy the prince of this world? The prince of the power of the air. The spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. Always know there's a spirit at work. Okay? From the child birth. To the old, to all. Anybody know anything about any children of disobedience? You know, y'all know any folks that say, I'm going to do what I want to do? The prince of this world, the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in every act of disobedience against God that ever happened. It's all spirit driven, okay? They are not that stubborn. We, none of us. None of us are that stubborn and that stupid all by ourselves. We're getting some help. It is an anointed hard-headedness. And you got to break that thing. They're getting some help, aren't we? The God of this world, your adversary, the devil, the prince of this world, surely he was not stupid enough to come to Jesus, the Holy One of God. Yeah, he did. And he will come to you. And you need to know that he has come. In the temptation in the wilderness, the devil said to Jesus, showed him all the kingdoms of this world and all the glory of them. I think he saw the Oval Office and said, all of this I will give to you if you, Jesus, will fall down and worship me, Satan, you can have all this. And you say, how? That is Satan worship. How in the world could Jesus have such a thought? It never said he had a thought. It said the devil said to him. And if you don't learn to distinguish between your own thought and what the enemy is saying, you'll live in constant condemnation. How could I feel such a thing? That wasn't your feeling. How could I? That was the enemy. The prince of this world came to him. He said, he has come and found nothing in me. There ain't nothing there he can talk to. I'm not sure that any of us are hardly there. Now let me just set another verse. That's John 14:9. No, that's further down. Let me go back. Verse 9 is a verse I'm going to talk to you about. Verse 9 is where Jesus said to Philip, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You want to connect those two verses and think, because they're just a few verses apart. From the prince of this world has come and found nothing in me. Until you, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. There ain't nothing of me in me. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. And the life that I live by the faith of the Son of God who gave himself for me. And if you're coming looking for something in me, of me, or of you, it ain't there. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And I think the devil said, oh me, I wasn't looking for him. The enemy always comes looking for something of himself and to project something of who he is into your life and into your destiny. And if you allow it, he will. I told class Wednesday night, that's the reason this verse in Proverbs about a soft answer turns away wrath. Because when the enemy comes in a wrong spirit, when he comes with wrath and anger, what that spirit wants to do is reproduce itself and multiply itself through you. The same spirit projected towards you is what's supposed to come back. And the enemy comes in anger and wrath to destroy. And you answer with a God answer and a soft answer. That don't mean he's any less angry. It just means it's all for me. And you learn to turn the enemy's attack by things like that. You must tell him, and you must know who you are in God and who God is in you and your position. Today, this day that we are living in, not some other day, this day. This is not a day to live half-hearted, sort of, kind of, in, tippy-toe, iffy, jiffy, hope so, think so, maybe it is, maybe it ain't, maybe today I am, maybe tomorrow I ain't. You cannot live in this, especially in areas that are supposed to be covenant and commitment. You cannot live on ground that is that unsure and hold your place in this world. There's some stuff that's got, this is not a day to live half-hearted, sort of, kinda, iffy, hope so, think so, maybe so, maybe not. This is a day to have your stuff nailed down in God. In the last days, some shall depart from the faith. That are in the faith, they will depart from the faith. 2 Timothy 4:1, I believe it, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. It's amazing that the people of God can be that deceived. A friend of mine, I heard him say, we backslide because we never did completely front slide. When you got in, you left yourself a way out. Oh. You have not determined that this is my spot, this is who I am, and this is where I stand. You have got to get beyond the cute little saying, the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise. Number one, you need to know the will of God for your life. You need to know. It is not time for you to figure that out when the bullets are flying. You need to know who you are and where you stand. This is my place. And this is the will of God. And the creek can do whatever it wants to. Because when you walk through the water, they won't overflood you. And when you walk through the fire, it won't. But that is not for iffy-jiffy people. Because if you can, everything that can be shaken will be shaken. We backslide because we never did front slide. We get in, get out because we never really got in. We come apart because we never understood that we were a part of this. 1 John 2, John says to the church in 1 John 2, y'all run around talking about Antichrist is coming. Y'all all jacked up about that. But let me explain this to you. There are many antichrists already in the world. They went out from us because they were not part of us. You fixing to witness that in what we have labeled as the church, because it ain't the church. Okay? And when it gets serious and when the bullets start flying, a lot of folk are fitting to cut on this thing. John said to the church, there are many antichrists already in the world, and they went out from us because they were not part of us. You will always go out from what you have not truly become a part of. And you've got to figure out who you are and where you're supposed to be and what your stand is supposed to be. If they had been of us, they would have continued with us. The Pharisees come to Jesus. Watch this. This is so interesting. This is one of those that I had to sit down with my Bible, and when I read it, and it's like you read the verse and you just read over and God said, whoop, 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 back up. Read that again. And what does that mean? It's like God asking me what that means. And you know what that means? It means I don't know, and I'm fixing to now figure out I don't know. He knows, and I got to ask him. Back up and look at this. The Pharisees come to Jesus and say, Master, and you just need to write out beside that old gag. Master, are you kidding? Gag a maggot. This is a game already. Master, show us a sign. Oh, I have walked the water, raised the dead, healed the lame and the blind, and you want me to show you a sign. And Jesus' answer to that is so interesting. He said, an evil and adulterous generation seeks a sign. Well, what's up with that? And really where God started to just challenge my thinking and challenge my spirit is, what has evil and adulterous generation got to do with seeking a sign? How is all that connected? And here's what I think that I got in my spirit, in my thinking about this anyway. Adultery is not basically a sexual sin. It is a sin against covenant. against covenant oneness and covenant unity and covenant relationships. Two unmarried people cannot commit adultery. They can't commit fornication. But adultery is the violation of a covenant relationship that you are supposed to be in one with and you're supposed to be in unity with. Jesus literally said, if a man puts his wife away, he causes her to commit adultery. Does that mean he causes her to go out and sleep with somebody? Oh, no. Don't you ever blame what you did on what somebody else did to you. But the reason that is real is because he has forced her to violate and break the covenant of unity in marriage. He has pushed her out of the covenant relationship, and in his adultery and his breaking their unity and their oneness, he has caused her to break it. Am I making sense? When you are supposed to be in unity, oneness, covenant relationship, not when you're in that, when you are where you are supposed to be in a covenant relationship of oneness and unity, which is marriage, which is the church, we are that with each other. And you yourself are not fully in. You are not connected. You are not covenant. You have not made the decision and the price and thought it out. This is who I am. This is my place. This is where I stand. Then there's no correct covenant on your part, and you have violated the life flow of the Spirit. You may have become one bodily, but you're not one spirit with that thing in the heart. And until you connect, you break and you violate the ability for the spiritual life flow of that union and that unity that God has designed. And you are seeking for a sign to say something that you do not have the right to hear. You don't have the right to have that information if you're not in a covenant relationship. Do you understand? Other words, when it should be unity and oneness and covenant and the life flow is not right, and when it's not, you are always seeking a sign to prove that the relationship is right. Because you're not one. And so you always measure and test and seek a sign. Galatians 3:15, just for your notes. Though it be only a man's covenant, if it be confirmed, no man disannuls that or adds to that. There's a stability in a covenant commitment that you cannot have anywhere else. Nobody messes with covenant. Hebrews 6:16, a oath for confirmation is an end to all strife. And you will live in strife until you nail things down and say, this is my spot. This is who I am. And there's a relationship here. I told folks Wednesday night, if I had to put a song on this generation, this is a just walk away Renee generation. I know I'm old, okay? But that was a song one time. Just walk off from it. And we walk off. And there's no sense of covenant relationship, so there's no sense of violation when we just walk off from the family, when we walk off from husband or wife, when we walk off from church, when we walk off from work. It's amazing how many people think that's the most wonderful job in the world day one. And see, you literally pray things through and find your answer and your place in God, and you nail that down. You don't think I showed up at work because I needed a paycheck. You literally see yourself as placed by God as who you are and where you are, and you got grounds to fight for your stuff. Basically, God stood me here. If you won't move me, come ask Him. That is literally the prince of this world has come and found, I ain't here because I want to be here. I'm here because if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And our lack of understanding covenant love, covenant relationship, covenant union, the oneness that we connect ourselves to has robbed us of a lot of life. And it is time for you, for me, for us to find our place in our heart, in our home, in our walk with others, to find our place, take our stand, and give our all, right? And in the parable, some seed fell by the wayside, and some seed fell on stony ground or shallow ground, which represents shallow relationships of the heart and shallow commitment. And the seed cannot do its work in a shallow, no-root relationship. And when the sun came up and the heat was on, that plant, because of its lack of commitment and deepness, withered and died. And that will always happen. Not because of heat, not because of persecution, not because things went, but because of a lack of depth. I really, truly believe we are living in the day that Revelation 12 talks about. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he ain't happy, because he knows his time is short. I really believe we're living there. And I'm going to give you some reason for that. I really believe that we are in the day where everything that can be shaken will be shaken, so that the things which remain are stuff that cannot be shaken. And we're going to find out what we nailed down about and committed about and what we're not. In our world and in our homes and in our lives and in our churches, everything that can be shaken will be shaken. But we've received a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And the enemy, the god of this world, your adversary, the devil, is determined to find a man called the Antichrist to rule over the spirit-driven system called the Antichrist system, and build in our world a one-world government, a one-world economy. He is determined to do that. A one-world banking system. He has a plan, okay? And he's looking for a man. He does not know the day or the hour, so several times through history, he had thought it might be his time, and he had a man prepared and sought to set him in. Corrupt world leaders all through history. And the demise and the destruction of this nation that we live in, that we call the USA, is part of that plan. We cannot be who we have always been and this plan work. Okay? We cannot stand in the independence and the strength that we once knew and this plan work. He has a plan to build a kingdom and to rule over that kingdom. And he would love to start in your heart and my heart. It's all about a plan. I'm going to read you something out of this little book here, okay? 600 pages of little. If when I had Debbie to order me this book, if I had known, I probably wouldn't have done it. But let me explain why this is so real to me. I know patterns in my life and the way God works. And I'm going on my way, and this happens, and I get focused in something, and God starts to put pieces from different places and things that happen together toward one thing in my life, and I'm thinking, I'm listening, I'm hearing you, okay? And this sort of, this revelation, this season that he's got me looking at this thing, sort of started 6 weeks maybe back, a month, 6 weeks, I don't know how far back, but Brother Jerry McDonald gave me about a 2-hour video that he wanted me to watch called Agenda. And it's basically about the socialist agenda, the communist agenda, and how that has been worked against this nation for the last 50 years. It's got nothing to do with socialism and communism. It's got to do with this one world government and the spirit that wants to rule these things. That's the drive behind it. But the fruit and the result of that, so I watched this thing, and he's got, from in the 70s, the 80s, I saw what was called the Humanist Manifesto, how man would become ruler of the world. And then I look at the Communist Manifesto, and they're one and the same. But they require the same things to happen among the people of God and the nation of God. And then I accidentally bump into this message that was entitled Jekyll Island's Canaanite Altars, and listened to that thing, and I didn't know anything about it, okay? Anybody y'all ever hear of Jekyll Island? Jekyll Island's a little island right off the coast of Georgia. And in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, 100 of the most powerful, wealthy men in this nation bought the island and built them a very secretive, private resort on that island. I'm going to tell you, if you know anything, red flags ought to jump everywhere. Okay? These boys don't play. When they invest their life and their time and their money and do something, you can bet there's an agenda. There's something else going on. And this communication then was not what it is now. You need to pick up the communication then and transportation then, and it costs to do these things. And they built a very private resort of 100 of the wealthiest men in the nation. And then in 1910, a very select, secretive group of those 100 men, 6 of them, 6 men, gather on this private island in a very secretive meeting, and they gather in a cottage that is built under the name of is Rockefeller's College on that island. Each family had one with their name and had a big. It's built in. This happened in Rockefeller's house, in his college on Jekyll Island, and they come together. And I doubt seriously they knew, but what they did, and this is where this message really hit me, is they had built everything in that commune right on top of an Indian village, and they built this house, and this room, this parlor that they stand in is directly above a blood sacrifice altar where the Indians that were there sacrificed babies and let their blood. And they gathered together for a secretive meeting in a room, 6 men, so secretive that the servants that normally worked were released, dismissed, sent home, and they selected their own people who would even know they were there. And they got together for one purpose, to create what this book calls the creature from Jekyll Island. You know it as the Federal Reserve System. It came out of that meeting. The problem with that is, it's like everything else the devil does. It's a smokescreen. It ain't real. It is not federal, and there is no reserve. They ain't nothing there. You really think about what's happening. There is nothing, zero, behind our money. It is an illusion. It does not exist. They generate books with nothing on paper, with nothing to back it up, and send $1 million to the bank, and the bank can loan $9 million off of that nothing. And it multiplies. And it is a very destructive, deceptive, and but they do control the economies of the world through that. They control every dollar that flows. They tighten the money down and create a recession, and they release the money and create an abundance at their pleasure, according to their benefit. And that creature has given birth to things like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. And I think a creature called the UN. The United Nations, which is another illusion. They ain't united about nothing. The only thing that they're united about is they all hate Israel. Some folks say that World War I was fought to prepare the land of Israel for the Jewish people. And at the end of World War I, the British signed the Balfour Decree and gave that land to Israel. But Israel was not interested in going home, so World War II was fought to prepare the Jewish people for the land of Israel. After World War II, they said, let's go home. After 6 million of us have been killed, let's go home. Maybe we better find our place in God. But it's interesting that World War I gave us something else. At the end of the war, they formed what's called the League of Nations to guarantee that we'd never have another war like that. But that didn't work, so they fought World War II and formed the UN. And it's like they formed the Federal Reserve Board to stabilize our economy. Are you serious? And they formed the UN to stabilize the world. So they're beating them up. Do you know how that's worked out? How's that working out for us? There's another creature that I think is probably the most deadly sinister that's born out of this whole thing that we know as the CFR, the Conference for Foreign Relations. And it is all part of a one world government, one world plan. And this book, I am not sure that this man is a Christian or writing from a Christian biblical perspective at all. He never says so in the book that he's a Christian, believes in Christ. He never in the book uses Scripture to say anything or connect anything. But it is 600 pages of tracing this creature through history and watching what he's doing and the way he is building a one world government and a one world, and he is on spot. He is on the mark. Now this is pulling off of page 507 out of this book, okay? You'll give me a minute to find all them pages. I'm going to sort of read the introduction to this thing. He has a little of a chapter. This is chapter 24. It's called the Doomsday Mechanism, the system that's being put together. He got a little introduction to each chapter about what you're fixing to read in that chapter. Let me read this. This chapter is about the decline of American prosperity. Have y'all noticed that? I would put out beside that and anything else that's called American. The decline of this whole nation and everything that we have stood for. The increase of the size of government. The first thing that anybody who wants to rule the world or your world will do is violate your relationship with your God. Okay? Because man is completely incapable of ruling himself and his own world. You can't do that. But if you can break a man's relationship with his God, the further man is removed from his God and his faith in God, the more government he demands to rule him. And this is to replace the dominion and the rule of God. Okay? The increase in the size of the governments of man. The decrease in personal freedom. There's a lot I could talk about all this, but I can't. The growth of taxes. And evidence that this is according to a plan by an elite ruling group which hopes to merge the United States into a world government on the basis of equality with lesser developed nations. In other words, we can't stay who we are and fit their plan. And the last thing, this is really good, the environmentalist movement, the EPA, shown to be an outgrowth of that plan. Now watch this. This is off of page 507. This little subtitle is called Mired in Debt, Stuck. Y'all think that that's a potential in our life today? One of the most obvious characteristics of our present time is that we are mired in debt. Federal deficits have grown steadily since 1950, and the rate of growth is a vertical climb. Watch this. It took 198 years. That's a 198. Like 2 being 200 years. It took 198 years for the government to borrow its first $1 trillion. That's not a million, which is 1,000,000. That's not a billion, which is 1,000 million. That's a trillion. Which, if you understand numbers, that is a 1 with 12 zeros, Jimmy. 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. All those zeros makes it feel like it's nothing there. That is correct. There's nothing there. Nothing. It took us 198 years to borrow the first $1 trillion. Then in just 12 years, mostly under the Reagan administration, it borrowed another $3 trillion. Wow, how we've grown. By the first year of George W. Bush's administration, even before the terrorist attack of 9/11, federal deficits have gone to over $5.8 trillion. Golly. By 2010, it had risen to $202 trillion. And he says, let me help you explain that. If you took a stack of $100 bills and stacked $100 bills on top of each other, that's 127,000 miles of $100 bills out into space. And by the time you read this page, it will reach the moon. Now, you telling me that there's anything stable under all of this? I'm going to read another thing from another chapter that speaks to some things here. I got more. I got to decide what. It seems that a group of very prominent, powerful, influential people are determined to sink this ship, and they're doing a good job of it. Okay. I'm going to turn to another page, and let me tell you the significance of this. I need to really set this in the proper light, because it's a different light for different one of us for a different reason, and I'll sort of explain that about what it's speaking to. Just remember that you've got to be removed from God to be subservient to the government of man. 198 years to reach 1 trillion, and in just a short period of time that has turned into 202 trillion. Now this is off of page 519. I really found this interesting about understanding the enemy and the battle that we face and how deceptive he is. This is a report from a survey group that they called the Iron Mountain Report, because of the base. It was a governmentally sponsored think tank. Okay? Government money sponsored this group to get together and have a think tank. What were they thinking about? They were thinking about how to easily, progressively move this nation toward accepting a new world order, a one world government, and becoming part of that. Now you need to listen to me hard and come up close, okay? How do we get our nation to lean toward and begin to accept and not pay attention to the fact that we're being sucked into a government system that is so corrupt? How would we go about that? You've got to know this is from 1966. This meeting happened in 1966. That's 50 years ago. Some of you were very young. Now, I was old and mature. I was 16 or 17 years old, and I still knew everything when this come down. Okay? But this is from 1966. This is not BC, it's BY. It's before you. And you think I'm joking, but it's very important. You were born into the spirit of this thing. The world you were born into is greatly influenced by the spirit of this thing. That makes sense? One world government change. 1 trillion to 200 trillion. Okay? Now this is, watch this. Part of the report. How do we do this? One of the answers. The report considered ways in which the public could be, keyword, preoccupied. Y'all know about preoccupied? How much time does thinking on God and the spirit of things have in our day? Ways in which the public could be preoccupied. Occupied too by other things. I know that's something going on, but ain't nobody got time for that. Preoccupied with non-important activities, stuff that does not make any difference at all, so that it would not have time to participate in political debate or resistance to the plan. Number 1, recreation. Now remember, I'm talking 50 years ago. Recreation. Trivial game shows, pornography, and situation comedy could play an important role. But blood games were considered to be the most promising of all the opportunities. Blood games are competitive events between individuals or teams that are sufficiently violent in nature to enable the spectators to vicariously work out their frustrations and their aggressions by being entertained by that activity. Hello? As a minimum, these events must invoke a passionate team loyalty on the part of the fans and must include the expectation of pain and injury on the part of the players. And he goes on down, let me skip down. Before jumping to the conclusion that such a concept is absurd in modern times, you need to recall that during the 1985 European Soccer Championship in Belgium, that the spectators became so emotionally involved in the contest that a bloody riot broke out in the bleachers and 38 people were killed and 400 were injured. In response to that, the U.S. World Report said, U.S. News and World Report, the root of the problem lies in a tribal loyalty to home teams that surpasses an obsession, and say some experts has become a substitute religion. Does that? And the beat goes on and on and on. And we keep marching to the music. And there is, in our day, I'm telling you about my own distractions and deception in trying to be in this battle. There is a smoke screen about what we are fighting. And they keep in front of us an agenda that consumes us to keep us from seeing the real battle. And so we need to be upset, and we need to get stirred up and indignant and blind to the real battle by dealing with things about this abortion issue and the homosexual issue. That is not where the battle is. There's a spirit behind that driving to separate people from God and keep us from seeing that, this party and this politics, and that is not where the battle is. All of that is the power behind the dresser. It is not out and not open yet. I'm going to read Ezekiel chapter 28 if you want to turn there. I'm looking at my time. I'm trying to be nice, okay? Ezekiel 28. There are two places in the Old Testament that give us a very clear picture of the enemy and his nature, the spirit of this thing. And it's Isaiah 14 and it's Ezekiel 28. Remember Isaiah 14 and then double it in Ezekiel, okay? Just reading from, I got to skip. Verse 11. Ezekiel 28:11. And you think when he addresses, he is speaking to a man, he's speaking to a king, but he's addressing the spirit behind the king, because what he speaks to in verse 13 and in verse 15 is a created being. Not a born being, not a God. God's not a created being. This is a creature, a created being that he's speaking to. Verse 11, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, Ezekiel said, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation, a word, upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, you seal up the sun, you are the totality of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You have been in Eden in the garden of God, that is, not a man. Every precious stone is your covering. The sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, the gold. The workmanship of your tabrets and of your pipes were perfect in you when you were created. Watch this, very important. Verse 14, you are the anointed cherub who covers, and I have set you there. You were up on the holy mountain of God. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in all your ways from the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your merchandise, you have filled the midst of you with violence, and you have sinned. Therefore, I will cast you out as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up in you because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness. I will cast you to the ground. Watch this. I will lay you before kings, that they may see and behold. He is a created being. He is not God's equal and opposite. God has no opposite because God has no equal. And I want you to just think about some of the things we read in those verses and what God says there. But in Isaiah's account, I won't even turn there, okay? This is out of Isaiah chapter 14. God asked the question, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Lucifer literally means light bearer, enlightened one. He is never called that after his fall. He is not the enlightened one. He is the prince of darkness and deception and death. That's his domain. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, light giver and light bearer? Watch this. This is how you have fallen. How are you cut down to the ground? Which did weaken the nations. Interesting concept, isn't it? You weaken the nations because you said in your heart, I will exalt my throne. I will be like God. Do you understand that concept? He exalts his throne and weakens the nations for the purpose of building his kingdom. And see, we all got our own little one world governments. We're going to rule our own little world in our own spot. And he is determined. You have got to set your focus on verse 14 of Ezekiel 28 for just a minute and think about this. You are the anointed cherub who covered, and I set you there. You have a spiritual place of dominion and authority. When the enemy said, I will exalt my throne, I heard one preacher say, well, who told him he had a throne? God told him he had a throne. God told him, I set you over this. You have an anointing and an authority from God to be a spiritual covering. You are the anointed cherub who covers a certain area, domain. And I'm the one who set you there. But the problem is, you didn't want the place I got you. You wanted to establish your own world government. The devil focuses and sets his attack against all anointed positions of authority. Hear me. That is the breakdown of the family. Parents, you are an anointed authority from God, and He has set you in that place over your home. Politicians are an anointed position. There be no authorities except those that are ordained of God. The policeman on the street is he is the minister of God for righteousness' sake. But let me tell you what has happened in our mindset and in our world. What has happened with this hatred? Because the enemy hates everything that carries the dominion of God into a position of authority that should have been his, that he fell from. And the attack is against the family, and it's against all governmental politics, and it's against the parents in the home, the politician in government, the policeman on the street, and the pastor in the church. Any position of anointed authority from God, he is out to destroy. Now, we got to close, but I want you to go to 2 Thessalonians 2. Because this really gets down deep into the plan, okay? And if we took the time that we really need to work this. But this really gets into out of the hands of the enemy into what we're seeing in our world and what he wants to do. And I'll just start in verse 3, skipping 1 and 2. You can read it. But he starts out to the church with, let no man deceive you. Because the end time are days of absolute deception. That is absolutely critical. You cannot be confused about who you are, what you believe, and where you stand, or you will be deceived in this day. Let no man deceive you. 2 Thessalonians 2, beginning in verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, because that day, the day of the coming of Christ, will not come except there come first a falling away. And then that man of sin, he has to be revealed before Jesus comes. That man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who, watch what he does, opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. Every position that is godly and carries godly authority in our government, in our church, in our home, in our cities, on our street, anything that represents the dominion of God, he opposes and exalts himself above that. So that he is worshipped, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God. Hello, temple of God. You do know you are the temple, don't you? And wants to show himself that he is God. Don't you remember that when I was with you, I told you these things? And now you know what holdeth, or what hinders his coming, that he might be revealed in his time. Because the mystery, the spirit of this thing, of lawlessness, of iniquity, which is lawlessness in our land, that spirit that works in the children of disobedience, the mystery of iniquity is already at work. Only he who hinders and holds this man back will hold him back until he's taken out of the way. Then that wicked one be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with his spirit, with the spirit of his mouth, and destroy with the brightness of his coming. even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power, signs, lying wonders, and all deceivableness. Everything that can be deceived will be deceived. Of unrighteousness in them who perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Because for this cause, God, G-O-D, God, will send them strong delusion that they should believe this lie. Interesting, isn't it? God will send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. There is coming a shaking. And what it is and what it ain't will be known. The line will be drawn straight between what is saved and what is what this verse says, damned, condemned. And because they chose not to receive the love of the truth, God Himself will send them strong delusion that they believe the lie and accept that lie for truth. That is the world that we are living in. The man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, the lawless one, is the spirit that drives what's going on in our world, who cannot be fully revealed as who he is until the church is taken out of the way. Let me just tell you something about this whole end time concept, okay? The church would mash him like a bug. Read a story one time about a guy who was sentenced to a long jail sentence, had 30 years to do in jail. And about the first day he's there, this little ant crawled into the cell, and he just developed a friendship with his ant, his only friend, and every day, and talked to the ant. And finally one day the ant started to talk back. He had a talking ant. And he thought, this is my fortune. This is my, when I get out of here, I've got. And he got out and he had his little ant in a little container and taking care of him, and went to the bar and ordered a drink and told the bartender, said, I'd like to show you something. And he said, sorry about that. Folks, this whole thing is coming down fast. And you look at the multiplication. That dollar bill literally says Federal Reserve, and there is none. It literally said this money is declared legal tender. You know what that means? You cannot demand anything else for payment. You really, by government, they can enforce no bank run. I mean, the people can go. But it is legally declared to be legal tender for all debts, public and private. So how can I take it and demand anything else since it's nothing anyway? And that is the reality of what we are living in. The mystery of iniquity. And the Federal Reserve System and all of this and all this happening, and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the nonsense of the EPA. I said nonsense. And the the Conference for Foreign Relationships, where all these nations need to join and become one, is all part of a plan. And you need to really go. We can't go to Revelation 17 and 18 and the judgment of the great whore. But when that demon, it's a spirit that rides the back of the beast, which is the Antichrist. She rides that system, and by her were all the kings of the earth made rich. By her we enjoy all these good things. By her. And you know what she's full of? The blood of the apostles and the saints of Jesus Christ. She is what's caused their death. But the whole earth is living off of the spirit of economy that's driven by this demon. And when she is judged, no man buys their stuff anymore. Their gold, their merchandise, their silver, their fine. Nobody cares. And she is the illusion hiding behind this thing that we call our economy. There is one that goes all the way back to the beginning and said, I will exalt my throne. I'd like to be in charge. How's he going to do that? He's going to first separate a nation from their God, a people, an individual. And then they have to be governed. And then he's going to corrupt that government. And he's going to corrupt an economy. And everything's going to be an illusion. God said, the kingdoms of this world shall become the kingdoms of our Lord and of His Christ. And He shall rule and reign forever. Which basically says to this spirit-driven system, sorry, Charlie, you won't have it. And He will no more exalt His kingdom and rule here on earth than He did in heaven. And so you got an everyday thing of your own little world, and who's going to have this one world government that we all deal with. Okay? And upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power to tread upon serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. He has delivered us from the dominion of darkness and translated us into the kingdom of His dear Son, or the Son of His love. Greater is He that's in you than anybody or anything that can get in this world system. That's why I say it is a day for us to determine and establish who we are in God and find our place, take our stand, give our all. Submit yourself, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And I think that you, men of God, have got to say, you know, y'all do what you got to do. But as for me and my house, this stuff ain't coming here. And it's a very interesting verse that we read the other night out of Revelation 18:4, where God says to His people, come out of her, my people, that ye receive not of her sins and her plagues, because I am fixing to judge that devil. Would you stand with me? I would just say, I'm not the one who can say to you, it is time for me to find my place, take my stand, and give my all in this war. But I will say to you that you need to say that to yourself. I have got to find out who I am in God, because this thing's coming down. I've got to know who I am. I've got to find my place. I've got to take my stand. And I've got to give my all. It is time for you to establish and determine some things. It is time for some men of God to awaken and go to war. It is time for you, children of the light, sons and daughters of the living God, to shine as lights in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. And I can tell you, when Jesus looked at them, and especially the 12, and said, some of you they'll cause to be put to death. You will be hated of all nations for my name's sake. It's because of this plan right here. And it is multiplying daily. The stupidity of the thing, the deception in the thing, the lack of voices who rise up and speak against the thing. Is getting more and more real. And it comes down to your decision and who you're going to be in God. When He said, this demon spirit, this lawless one, golly, Bill, we know him, don't we? Who wants to exalt himself and sit in the temple of God in your life, in the place that belongs only to Jesus, and rule your little world for you, through you. That demon is broken when you see the light and give yourself to God. your life and your world does not have to be in chaos and confusion. And when the world's values are so upside down and so nothing and so fixing to come undone, so fast, I'm challenging a people who say they believe in Jesus into a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Him, and into a battle and a warfare to have discernment enough to look at folks and know what the enemy is doing to them to destroy their world. And I'll just close with this word. Jesus said it's coming down. And when you see these signs, don't hang your head down and don't be afraid. You look up. You lift up your head because your redemption draws nigh. And I don't plan to just ride this thing out in deception and darkness trying to go along to get along. And I hope you don't. And we're talking about any hope for a world for our kids and grandkids to live in. Hear me. Because this is anti-God and it is anti-Christ. And it is demon-driven. And God has a people. And I just speak to the Spirit of the living God to wake up the warrior that's in me